This is the pain-free rig suite Quickstart for riggers. If you haven't yet, please check out the previous artist Quickstart video. We will be covering the most important rigging functionality you'll need. So here I have a new scene. I'm going to go ahead and open the tool via the command. And now I'm going to go ahead and create a new rig route in the scene. At the top, I'm going to click File from the menu bar and go to User Settings. The User Settings contains everything that's going to be used across rigs or when creating rigs from scratch. So up top we have the default name for the rig routes to be named as temp. We have the aim axis as X and the up axis as Y, rotation order, joint display size, the default colors for controls, the default shapes for controls, the default naming scheme. I'm going to close this out. Next I'm going to click up here, back on rig route, and go edit rig. This allows us to edit the rig in our current scene. Up top we can change the rig route name just as before from the user settings, as well as adjust the naming order and show and hide the rig route name in the naming scheme. Let's go ahead and close that out and move on to the limb setup. This is where you will set up your limbs. I use the term limb here liberally, as it's just a small collection of joints, a behavior, and some controls. Limbs may contain one or more joints sharing the same parent or be a single chain of joints. You may also have empty limbs which have no joints but are used for the center of gravity or cog control or the root control. Here I will manually draw out some joints using the joint tool by right-clicking on scene joints and clicking the joint tool, and I can draw some out right now. I'm going to go ahead and get that joint tool again, draw some more joints out, and now we have a couple of sets of joints. However, they are not appearing in the scene joints list. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on it and click refresh. And now we have it successfully populated with the joints from our scene in here. Next, I'll show you a couple of ways that you can create limbs. So I'm going to select a set of joints here, right click, and choose add joint limb. And I'm going to go ahead and name this arm. Okay, and that adds arm over here. And arm is typically the shoulder, elbow, and wrist joints. So those joints rename based off of an internal template. Alternatively, you may right-click in the Scene Joints window and select Auto Build by Hierarchy to create all of the limbs it can based off the current joint structure. I'll do that, and it'll create the second limb for our other set of joints. I'm going to double-click here to rename it and just title it Arm. Now, by renaming that limb to Arm as well, it did several things. One, it replaced all of the joint names based off the internal template of arm being the shoulder, elbow, and wrist joints, but it also set it to be the mirror of the original arm limb. As you can see here, they are red for right and blue for left. So these limbs have been set to mirrors of each other, regardless of if they have the same number of joints or even the same joint names. You can also right-click in this limbs hierarchy window to see a variety of tools to aid you in your rigging process, such as mirroring limbs, updating joint positioning, saving and loading templates, flipping limb locations, exporting out joint animations, and more. If you move any of these joints and they are already bound to a mesh, then you can simply rebuild the skins by clicking right here on Rebuild Skins to preserve the joint weights while adjusting the mesh to be updated with the changed influences and their positions. Now let's look at an arm example. I'm going to go ahead and click Debug and go to Arm Test. This will load up this arm right here, and now we're going to demo the auto build by names feature. If our joints are named as some limb underscore and then whatever side it is and underscore whatever joint name it's going to have, as we see here, by clicking auto build by name, we will have all of our limbs built up and the joints named appropriately. And so we have bicep twist, forearm twist 1 and 2, indexes for the fingers, middle, etc. Let's go ahead and save out this current rig, and we're going to title this alpha underscore arm underscore setup rig and press enter to save that out. Next, we're going to do something strange. We're going to go under rig root and we're going to export animation rig, and we're going to do that in the exact same folder. We're just going to select our newly saved file and we're just going to replace the setup portion of the name with animation so that this will be our animation rig, and we're going to export that out and we're done. Alright, so what if you have an FBX file that you want to rig up, but it has animations on it? Well, first thing we're going to do is create a new scene. We're going to go ahead and import a Mixamo downloaded example file here. Import it. And if we scrub through, we can see that this FBX file has animations baked down to the skeleton. What are we going to do? Well, I'm going to go ahead and click rig root, new, update rig root, and this will create a rig root for our scene. Next, I'm going to go ahead and save this file out as alpha mixmo setup rig. Click save. Now notice that the naming structure here is not what we need for the build by names. So instead what I did is I created my own script that will rename all of these joints to basically fit the new naming structure, and then the function essentially just calls the basic auto build by names. So I'm going to click that, and now we're going to notice that the entire rig is going to have limbs now. And we can scrub through and see that our limbs are created. That's great. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select all of our limbs, right mouse button, and then click at the very bottom, export animations. And it's going to ask for our animations. We're going to call this Mixamo_demo. Okay, that's going to be saved out. All right, now with our animations exported out successfully, what we're going to do next, oh, and notice here the tool has locked up. That's because we finished exporting. What we're going to do next is just go ahead and click new and update rig. This will make sure to update to the rig that's currently in the scene, and our tool will unlock. So now what we want to do is we've got all these joints still baked to the skeleton. We're going to go ahead and remove those. So right click on the limb view, and we're going to go to the bottom and click remove animation. And it'll say, are you sure? Yes, I'm super sure. So now we've removed all of those animations. However, our skeleton is still posed weird. So what we're going to do is set all the joint rotations to 0 here. And this will basically zero out our entire skeleton back to its T-pose. There we go. And now we have a perfectly created rig ready to roll. So I'm going to go ahead and save this out, Control S, and we're just going to go ahead and test it out just so you can see how everything's working. So we have controls in here, but they're kind of hidden in there. So what we're going to do is just adjust them real quick. So we're going to jump over to the operation appearance, and I'm just going to go ahead and in the appearance tab, just start selecting controls and scaling them up to how I think they should be. It doesn't have to be great. Like this is just a simple demo rig. We're just going to go ahead and select a few, move them around. All right, and I've just gone ahead and scaled up and positioned to just a few of these controls, just roughly, to test things out so it's more clear when we're binding and unbinding the rig. So now everything's working correctly. We're going to jump back over to appearance, and we're just going to go ahead and save this file out, and then we're going to go ahead and export out the animation rig just as before. Select the alpha mixmo setup file, and we're just going to go ahead and rename that to animation file and click save. Again, we're going to use this in the next video as well. So again, here we are with the arm setup rig, and we're just going to go ahead and click update to make sure that we have the latest and greatest, and we're going to jump over to the behavior operation. The behavior operation is where you're going to determine the limb's functionality. And so here we can select any given limb right here in the limb hierarchy view, and we can also change the behavior type. So for instance, since it's one joint, we can set it to FK branch or look at. If we select the arm, we have a lot more options of setting it to FK chain reverse, branch, FK relative, IK pull vector, FK IK, etc. We can also change the functionality by middle mouse dragging to rearrange how limbs are interparented. We can also right mouse button to add and remove empty limbs, reset limbs to defaults, reset controls, and save presets. Over here we can enable the limb, set the behavior type, and change the parent joint that each limb is parented to. So let's go ahead and test out some of this functionality. I'm going to go under operation and click test, and let's just see how it's performing. So if we grab a clavicle or elbow, everything seems to work hierarchically just as we'd expect, okay? But let's say that we had Ant-Man. Ant-Man is actually going to grab us by the fingertip, and he wants to manipulate us kind of in a reverse chain way. So what we can do is we can select the arm. That's going to be our first chain that we're going to reverse, and set that to FK chain reverse. And then we're going to select that index finger that we're being grabbed by, and we're going to change that to reverse. And now let's go ahead and test the functionality to see what happens. So if I grab this, now you'll notice all of the index finger joints are reversed in functionality all the way on down. However, we're not getting the hand or the wrist to follow it, and none of the arm or clavicle is. So if I grab the wrist, this is working more correctly, but not quite right, because the limbs aren't parented correctly. But the functionality is working great. So let's jump back over to behavior. And now what we're going to have happen is the index is going to be the root limb, and then we're going to have the arm parent underneath that and the clavicle parent underneath the arm. And let's go ahead and retest this out. And so now for grabbing individual joints of the finger, Ant-Man is going to have his way with us. So we can see that the relationships of the limbs depends on the limbs' behaviors and the limbs' parenting. Cool. Next, let's jump over to the Appearance tab to change the appearances of some of our controls. So here in this Appearance tab, you can start to select controls real quickly and scale them down, position them higher, all without worrying about having to break the rig. So I can select the key FK joints and those controls and scale them up. I can move that clavicle out further, so that's looking good. And then for these in-between joints, I can also just like scale them up, but make them thinner because these are going to be twist joints, all in seconds. Other functionality you have in here is to lock and hide channel boxes for the limb controls. Based on if it's a joint limb or if it's a IK limb. We can also select individual controls here, set their colors. So here I can quickly set that to be whatever color we want for the middle, and we can also adjust the opacity of it and change the shape as we desire. So if I wanted to, I could change these all to polygon spheres. And now we can see they've all gone along for the ride and scaled appropriately. For more info on any and all of these features, feel free to check out the documentation under Help Documentation. Next, let's jump over to the skinning tab real quick. So under the category, I'll set that to skinning setup and select the operation to mesh setup. And under here, since we don't have any meshes, we don't actually see anything, but this is just basically you're adding meshes from here to be skinned, or you're removing them, and then you have access to the paint weights tool. There will be more features coming in the future beta release, but for now, the skinning setup section and the skinning operations suck more than my vacuums. In the next video, we will do a quick start for animators.